Hello everyone, this is Zoltar, and this video is going to be a little bit different. Unfortunately, I did not record the game I just played. I intended to, I didn't. I'm an idiot, sorry. I wanted to show you guys some stuff about it though, if I could, very quickly, because it was a little bit interesting, and it kind of helps to make a point in the game that a lot of people don't seem to understand. They give up really easily. They don't think they're able to have kind of come from behind victories, and to some extent they're right. If their opponents were to play perfectly, it would be extremely difficult for them to come from behind. However, that never is going to happen. That's almost never going to happen. Look, the game is still extremely young. There are always new avenues to explore, new things to do, new things to try out right now. And so I kind of want to show this idea of, look, you don't have to give up just because things are going badly for you. And I also want to show the idea that, look, the Offworld isn't everything. So let's take a look. We're starting off on my resources page, but I actually don't want to start here. I want to start at my stocks page. I was Niven this game, for the record. You see this blue line that fires up right at the end of the game? That's me. I'm hanging out down here, kind of in the bottom of all of these colors. You can't even really see me very well, but you can kind of get the idea. I'm basically down here under this mess right here. I kind of I let my debt go for a little while this game. I got a few of my shares purchased by people. I bought up eventually. I managed to, around here, kind of get into a foothold and managed to buy up my own stock and then buy out the people who had bought in me and then pay off all of my debt. So that worked out pretty well. It beefed up my stock price a lot. It's a fantastic move if the reason you're getting bought is because you happen to have 100,000 debt. So that's kind of what was going on here, and what caused this start of a bump right here was that series of moves. As you can see, other players are starting to get knocked out, but because I've managed to actually secure all of my stock, I'm no longer an easy target. I am most certainly a target, but I'm not simple to take out. So I guess that's the first thing we should talk about this video. When to buy yourself out. Everybody thinks that button is a complete suicide button. They're wrong. That button's extremely useful. That button is amazing if you are using your debt correctly. That button can be fantastic. That button can save your life. The buyout button is for when you have a way to make your stock price explode immediately after hitting it. And that's pretty much always means just paying off all your debt. So that's when you use that button. You have a lot of debt. Some of your stock's been bought up. You buy up all the rest of it, make yourself hard to attack, pay off all your debt, your stock price goes through the roof. It's fantastic. Issue number 2 here. You obviously can come from behind, right? I'm not in a strong position here. There are 3 front runners. We've got Herbert, Burrows, and Ellison. Right at the top of the game, right in here, Herbert gets off to a fantastically strong lead. Stock price is actually a pretty good indication of where people were this game. Not always, but it is here, I believe. Burrows, I think, is maybe doing a little better than his stock price indicates, but that's about it. Like, he would be maybe more up in here if we're an actual judge of where he was. So I'm way down here. I'm in trouble, right? And here's what I did. I just looked. I just saw. It was a big game. There were a lot of people. Everybody was trying to get Offworlds up, right? The people who were consolidating other people were also trying to get Offworlds up, and so it just came to looking at the map. Outplay your opponent. Herbert got stuck in this idea of water resources the whole time. It worked out for him fantastically because everybody else moved into steel. He just grabbed up a whole bunch of steel from them as people were like feeding it into the market, just trying to be able to afford their own upgrades, be able to afford their glass. So he just buys up a bunch of steel and a bunch of glass and is just sitting there selling off the food and water that everybody needs. And he starts off the game fantastically, moves right into Offworlds. Unfortunately, first of all, he didn't look at the game very well because Offworlds were not actually particularly valuable this game. The single most valuable commodity to send Offworld, I think, was fuel at something like 37,000. So always check that before you do an Offworld rush like Herbert did here. Number 2, he didn't move out of it quickly. If we look here, those resources never changed. Literally all game, he had these 3 reactors, these 3 farms, and these 3 glass furnaces. Fantastic in the early game. It completely destroyed everyone in the early game. Never changed in the late. Big mistake number 1 out of Herbert that you can kind of watch out for. Big thing number 2, you may look around. If we just kind of look around, First of all, we can see my ridiculous silicon farm. It was pretty good, actually, this game, because there's not a lot of silicon. So these are kind of ways you can start coming from behind. Just look around the map. Just look around the map. What do we see? And what do we don't see? We don't see a lot of silicon, right? Silicon was pretty important in this game. Kind of along with that, we're actually not seeing a whole lot of carbon either. So you can identify extremely early a late game resource that might be extremely difficult to get a hold of and extremely lucrative if you can manipulate the market with the hacker array enough, and that's electronics. I won this game again. This was my starting area. This was my end of game. It's not pretty. Let's be frank about this. That does not look pretty. This is because Thinking Machines is kind of silly. If we're honest, that's why things ended up looking the way they did at the time. This Goon Squad, obviously not in a good spot. There kind of used to be a patent lab here. Things get weird. Things get funky, right? But at least I'm making the right thing. Because if we go over here, we can see that our prediction of electronics is eventually going to be crazy this game comes true. First of all, it's an 8-player game. A lot of Offworlds getting bought up. Potentially a lot of other special buildings that require electronics. Things like the hacker array. I believe maybe the engineering lab. Maybe not. I think the engineering lab is actually chemicals. But I believe the Pleasure Dome, also potentially electronics. By the way, look, my one Pleasure Dome, 372 a second. Power was in the tank like all game long. No other Pleasure Domes. Watch out for these things from your opponents. If they're making those mistakes, capitalize. They're always going to make a mistake. This game is ridiculously complicated. Just watch out for it. So let's look at exactly, we saw that nobody was making electronics except for me. We had these 3 up here from one random scientific, whatever. And if we go back to the resources graph, we can see I didn't make that much money from Offworlds. 689,000. I launched a total of 22 Offworld markets. And many of those were from mutinies, quite frankly. A little food and a little fuel. Where I made my killing was in stupid electronics. I made 1.7 million almost from electronics that game. I hate electronics. Electronics are a terrible resource. They're impossible to make. Frustratingly slow to develop. It's just insane. But here, it worked. Yes, I bought a large amount of carbon. I eventually surplused the carbon and that became a non-issue. So we can say that cut into my electronics production. But aluminum, I didn't buy a lot of aluminum at all. 31,000, that's nothing compared to this number. Silicon, I didn't buy much silicon. I made money on silicon at the end of the day. Sold it when it was high, just used it when it was low. Not a big deal. But other people this game, let's check out other people. We pointed out Herbert as a front runner, right? Let's look at Herbert real quick. Herbert lost money on World. Lost money on World at the end of the day because he refused to scrap his resources and move into something new, right? We saw that. We saw that he had the exact same resources. You can see he did fantastically early game with water, food, oxygen, and fuel. It was amazing for him in the early game. And eventually he moved into selling all of these things off-world. They were all pretty close in price. This is actually fairly reasonable, even though it may look a little bit weird. He had to buy up so much steel, though, and so much glass and so much electronics in the late game, purely because he had to keep his off-world markets online. That was his end-game goal, and he didn't really adjust his economy into that. So Herbert actually fell out of the running really quickly after he got his off-worlds online because he was focusing everything on just, I need to keep these off-worlds launching. These off-worlds just need to keep going. They just need to keep going. And he got a few offline. He got a couple of buyouts. He got some more off-worlds online even. But on-world, his auto-purchasing and his purchasing combined lost him $200,000. What is that? He only made $1 million this game? Only $1 million. This is an 8-man game that went crazy long. That's insane. Now, Burroughs, another frontrunner, another fantastic player from what I was seeing, really, really solid. He went off-world very quickly. He was selling oxygen, entirely reasonable. I went with fuel because fuel was incredibly cheap. Every single time I bought it, I just kept buying fuel at like $3 and sending it off, so it ended up being cheaper in my opinion there. But he used oxygen. That was okay. That was a good call. Sold all kinds of food. We can see he hit the food right. He sold 200,000 food on World. That was great. That was how he was making his money. It was fantastic. He sold plenty of steel. He stayed in steel appropriately. He bought a lot of chemicals. Maybe that hurt him. He bought a lot of glass. We said that hurt him, and we bought a lot of electronics. He was the other one making electronics that game, by the way. But I had teleportation, so he was really struggling because of his starting position. So he was a bit better that game, right? He did a bit better. He was kind of creeping along, making it. But eventually, you can kind of see that all these players, and we'll go to the last guy real quick, just so you can see that too. Ellison, we'll look at him. Look, his numbers on World are tiny. All of their numbers on World are tiny because all of them got to Offworld and then just got lazy. They were like, whatever, just Offworld race. You don't have to just Offworld race. You never have to just Offworld race. You can sit there, just have your Offworlds kind of in the background running for you. Yeah, they're good. That's great. Focus on the on-world market because that is what your resources should look like. That's what you're able to sell on world if you pay attention. You can do that. You can make that stupid amount of money on world potentially. And yes, my power is in the tank. I always auto purchase all kinds of power. It's okay. Eventually you'll learn to love auto purchasing power. It'll win you so many games. Don't worry about it. I can explain that in another video. For now, I want to focus on this idea of, look, just because you're behind doesn't mean you're out, even in this game. It's hard to recover. It is. But watch your opponents. Your opponents aren't perfect. Your opponents aren't computers. They will make mistakes. Frankly, if they were computers in this game, they'd probably be making more mistakes. Computers like to start the game with a hydroponic farm. I don't know. Whatever. But it's okay to fall behind. You can recover. Just stay focused. Keep an eye on the map. Always know what your opponents are putting into the market so you can know what it's going to be best to buy and what it's going to be best to sell. My pirates are seriously still right here. All right, look, guys. I'll be straight with you. Glass got up to like 200 right at the start of this game. This guy, 2 glass furnaces down. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Eventually that'll be so much glass. It'll take a while because they're, spread out and stuff. But eventually, it's going to be amazing glass. They're still there. He never sent oxygen out to make the glass, and he died real fast. And then nobody else ever sent the oxygen out to make the glass. I don't know. It's weird to me. Look, it's fine. Mistakes like this, though, are why you lose games, right? Like, if those had been making glass, yeah, it would have given me earlier money, because those were like the first pirates of the whole game. And I was like, right there, oh, they're mine. Got them for like a really cheap price. But seriously, yeah, you can give me some glass at first, and then you get your glass back. And that's okay, and you should take advantage of that, and it's good. I don't know. There are honestly a lot of mistakes all over this map. I don't want to go over all of them. I just kind of wanted to cover the basics of just because you're down doesn't mean you're out. That's what it comes down to. Black market's your friend. The regular market's your friend. Other players are actually your friends. Just make sure you use them. Thank you everyone for watching my little rant. I'll see you next time.